And just like that, it is already time to talk about the last car of Gran Turismo 7 1.34. We've left the most cliched till last, the 1990 shape Nissan R32 Skyline GT-R Nismo. If I sound a little bit nasal, it's because hay fever season is kicking in. And as far as this car goes, I left it until last because, I mean, on the one hand, a review like this is always going to be easy to do because you know exactly what you're going to get, but also it's the kind of car that you can both praise and complain about, and you can kind of understand, even if you don't agree with both, you can understand both sides, because for those who are really happy that the car is here, of course you're happy. If you're a JDM fan, if you're a Skyline fan, you know it's going to be a good car. They always are good, be it a rear-wheel drive model, an all-wheel drive model, turbo or otherwise. They're always really good. But on the other hand, it's yet another R32. It doesn't look that different. Of course it technically is, but it's not that different in a game where you can tune both of them anyway. And even then, Gran Turismo has this long-standing running joke of how many Skylines there are of every generation, and unfortunately this is kind of one of those ticking that box yet again. Be that as it may, of course it still is worth talking about. So first of all, let's talk price, because this is hefty. I mean, it's the most expensive out of the three cars, and if that doesn't give you perspective, rightfully so or not, based on real-world prices, it's kind of a ridiculous price to have in the game. 400,000 credits, and it's not even about whether or not that's affordable or easy to get. It's just the principle of the thing. 400 grand is ridiculous for a car like this. Now, of course, it is fantastic, and even as far as the collection goes in the game, they put it up against the Sierra RS500 and of course the BMW E30. You'll even see those in this event from my garage going up against them. But also, as you can tell from the event, this thing has no trouble dispatching them whatsoever, despite the fact that both of those cars from my garage are moderately well tuned. Of course, the M3 featured in a prior special projects, and the other one may or may not be an Easter egg for a future one, I'll let you decide. But as far as this particular Skyline goes, I haven't really done that much to it. I mean, as I recall, I think I lowered it, put the race exhaust on. I think that might have been about it pretty much. Maybe one or two other things, but nothing much. And even with just that, it's already fantastic, because of course it is. Yes, Skylines are brilliant, but you always have that extra pinch of polyphony salt on the top, just to make it that little bit more OP. And ironically, despite being technically OP, it's actually not particularly OP in a literal sense. It's not an overpowered car. It has about 306 horsepower, weighs 1,400 kilos, so decent enough numbers, but it doesn't stray too far outside of the quote-unquote gentleman's agreement in Japan, which it seems pretty much no cars ever actually had in the first place, even though they were all supposed to have it. And even the weight, you know, it's fine. 1,400 kilos for a moderately sized four-wheel drive car isn't too bad, but that's not as light as you might think. It's a lot heavier than something like an Evo, for example, or an Integra. The point level is 508, which I wouldn't say feels excessively high or low. Of course, it is way too quick at that level, so I guess by definition that means it should be a bit higher, but even if you say it should be higher, by how much? You know, if you want to really get technical about it, it would probably jump it up to maybe 510, 520, perhaps more, but it's not going to make that much of a difference in the majority of the game. And apart from the initial purchase price, pretty much everything else is what you'd expect from a Skyline. Now, of course, there is a place for special edition cars, special trims. Of course, I would absolutely love to see stuff like the Tommy Kyra Skylines, even something like a Mine Skyline. In fact, many of the special projects that I've already done, and some that are still to come, are entirely based around the concept of those aftermarket or otherwise special edition cars. And of course, anyone who knows my taste in cars, well, for my entire life pretty much, knows that I'm never going to speak against a homologation special, because I love stuff like that, especially in the rally world. But it's more so, and I actually said this in a reply to a comment on a different video, to me it's less about whether or not the car is good or not, and it's more so about where time and effort is assigned. That's where I take more of an issue with cars like this. Another prime example being the couple of different AE86s or the couple of different BRZs that we have in the game. It's not that someone won't love it, because of course every car has its fans. It's more so about when there are so many fewer cars being added to the game, as well as having less cars in the first place, as most of the previous games had. well, then you kind of would hope that they would really assign the time and effort and licensing costs to getting cars that feel like they really matter, either returning faces or newer ones. And when I say that they really matter, that's again not to disparage this car in any way. It is very good. It's just that, would you rather have this, or would you, for example, rather have Koenigsegg make its debut in the game? Or would you rather see something like a Bentley Speed 8 come back, or a debut of a Bentley Continental GT3, just to name a couple of examples of new and or returning faces? Would you, for example, choose this over even something like, for me, a Renault Espace F1, maybe for someone else, something like a Tomicara ZZ2, to speak of Tomicara again, or even a Mainz Skyline. See, to me, that is the difference. I have no issue with having the quote-unquote yet another Skyline if it's something that feels different. A Mainz Skyline, a Tomicara Skyline, they are so different to a standard Skyline, and even though you can create your own, you still genuinely have a different experience with those cars. And any who played the older games know exactly what I'm talking about. They were very different animals. This just isn't that far apart from the other R32 that's already in the game, which is already brilliant. Just like the different STI or non-STI versions of the BRZ, or different versions of the 86 or the AE86, or different Integras, or especially if you go to the older games in the series, stuff like all of the different NSXs, all of the different S2000s, all of the different fill in the blank. And I did so many videos back then literally comparing all of those different versions to see how many of these are actually even worth buying, and so many of them can be completely discarded. Now this of course is not at that level, it's nowhere near as memeable as it used to be, but to me it's very much running the line. Does it have its fans? Does it have people who would vehemently and unironically answer my questions earlier on with, no, I would rather have this car than any of the ones that you mentioned? Well, maybe so. And, you know, I can understand that. If someone were to ask me, would I like to see one of my own cars in the game, or, you know, fill in the blank? Well, of course, we all have our preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It just seems that when it comes to picking cars, Polyphony does so on a kind of weird basis, where sometimes it seems like they really do listen to the community, wherein you have like a leaked Lexus LFA or an Evo 9, or even more recently something like a Jag XJ220 coming back. But then on other occasions they add cars which almost no one is asking for, and sometimes maybe some people are asking for, but definitely not the majority of people. So it's kind of weird. On the one hand, I want to support that idea because I like having an eclectic mix, even as you can see from my own special projects packs. I like having loads of different cars mixed in together to appeal to a wide audience. But that kind of goes back to my point and my main issue. When I do special projects, I do 10 cars every time. This is not 10 cars. This is 33% of an update being represented by a Skyline that has about 20 horsepower more than the one that we already had. That is not something which I'm necessarily going to cheer for. It doesn't make me angry, it just makes me disappointed. I feel like the proverbial dad. So, of course, that's it for my thoughts overall. It's definitely not a bad car, and I know that for many people the standout about it, if nothing else, is going to be the very cool visual upgrades that you can do, in particular with the wide body, to turn it into the race replica. Overall, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, it will be a more controversial one because there are people who love many of these duplicate cars, JDM or otherwise, or not necessarily duplicates, but different trim levels, etc. And as I said, I can understand that, but give me your thoughts either way down below. And of course, stick around on the channel for more GT7 content. I am indeed planning to do content revolving around the engine swaps and some ultimate parts. So of course, stick around for those things, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.